Stellar's a hard worker and all-around great hops user. His proficiency with hops is up there, and I recommend him to everyone. For that reason, he's been added to the links area of HardOps where you can go to his YouTube channel and check him out. I definitely recommend everybody just giving him a shot. So whenever you see the Maya theme, or basically the gradient background, just know that I'm showcasing an older version in order to compare it against a newer version. So one of the things unique about hops that was a bit of a bug was if you were in edit mode with multiple objects that were separate but selected both and you were in edit mode, if we deselected and just ran mark, we see that it only marks one object. In fact, this was always something a little bit annoying. I mean, we could still select other elements of the other mesh and mark them manually. However, the ability for mark to just auto mark was something that was a little bit of a problem. In fact, we see that after unmarking everything, it unmarked everything on this mesh but not the other. And we mark it again and we see that it's only toggling for this mesh. So I'm happy to announce that this bug has been resolved. We have mesh A, mesh B, and if we tab into edit mode and deselect and we were to press Q and choose mark, we see that we're now able to mark both meshes at the exact same time. And of course, this goes for object mode. If you were to press Q and go under operations and choose sharpen, you will also sharpen both meshes at the same time or multiple meshes at the same time. So we'll start off using box cutter and we'll just make a quick slice. And with this slice selected, we can press Q, go under operations, and there's an option for brush. If we click on it, we see that it jumps us straight into sculpt mode. And if we click on the name of the brush, notice that it now switches you to the brush immediately without any further delay. And then of course you can bring it up and exit sculpt mode if needed. However, I will change this to a cloth brush and we'll control click voxelize in order to set the size. And then we'll click voxelize to voxelize it, and just perform a few cloth grabs on this particular slice, and just wanted to show that it's now working as it's supposed to. After a few refinements, we could press Q, go under brush, click, and just exit this, and even go under modifier and roll it with a smooth in order to roll in and out the detail as much as we need it. There's a lot to Accushape and there's a lot of ways to access it. For example, if you have nothing selected and you press Q, Accushape is located in the Q menu for no selection. And whenever you start it with no selection, you're able to just draw a box, and then whenever you bring it up for the extrusion, you're then able to type in measurements. However, also in Hops tool, when you press Alt W, Accushape is now located at the top in front of the Smart Shapes where you can go and access it from that way. But it's also able to be accessed by pressing Q and going under operations, and underneath To Shape is the new Accushape. So if we just jump into it with a selection, we can use it the way it's supposed to be used. So if we look at this shape, based on our selection, it tells us that this object that we have selected is 4.2 meters. So that really doesn't sound that bad. I mean, you know, how big's a meter? I live in America. If we jump over to Imperial, we see that this thing is 14 feet tall, which, you know, I'm no ruler or anything, but that's maybe bigger than my entire car. So we want to change this over to inches and lower the height to something more reasonable, like 33 inches. And we see that it will auto center automatically and equalize automatically, keeping your original aspect ratio of the model based on the shape calculation that it makes at the very beginning. To apply this operation, we can press spacebar, and now the tire is scaled inside of the lattice to the proportions that we want. And if we were to hide it and select this object again, and we go inside Accushape, we can see that it now tells us that this is on the height 33 inches. So it's precisely the exact height that we wanted it to be. There's a lot more to Accushape than just this. However, to keep it brief, it is a system that is to be assistive with getting real world scaling with objects. And there's a plethora of cases it can be used in. For example, I'll start a new scene and we'll press D and just draw a box. And if I shift this to live, we can just press Q and under operations choose Accushape. When it comes to scaling, you can press F for a face mode, and by control clicking a face, you can actually set an anchor point. So let's say we want to lower the width of this or change the height to something more specific. People always say they want to make something a couple of centimeters. So if we just jump this over to centimeters on the metric side, we want to say lower the height of this to be 2 centimeters. and we see that it's scaled down using the anchor point that we specified, and then when we press spacebar, the object is now scaled to the size of the Accushape lattice that we created for this. So it's definitely useful for getting things to a particular scale, but since it is a lattice, there are strange issues that can occur with it, so it must be, of course, used with care. And some things jumping from very high sizes to very low can definitely cause issues, but it is our first foray into making scale-based, dimensional, accuracy-based assistive tools, so I hope everyone gives it a try. Ndof mouse support was also added to this version of HardOps, where if you're using an Ndof mouse, when you're inside any of our modals, you'll be able to go in and look around. If you personally want my opinion on Ndof mice, I find it to be an interesting modeling experience. You find yourself able to get into nooks and crannies that you never would be able to as easily with a mouse, where you can just look at your models in a whole new light. So if you're using an operation like bevel, for example, just know that you can still interactively adjust your modal, but also adjust your view at the same time if you're using an Ndof mouse in your other hand. And so in order to do this issue, I kind of made everybody on the team involved get Ndof mice, and we've just been having fun just mousing around with this really crazy dial mouse, just looking at surfaces and seeing things in a whole new light. So I hope anyone with this mouse gives it a try. So in HardOps, it can be hard to keep up with the amount of things that happen and keeping up with what's new. And believe me, we're always thinking of ways to try to mitigate that aspect of tools in 3D to try to make it easier for users. And one of the things added to this version is a tip system. I've always wanted a screensaver for hops, a tip system to display, letting users know just kind of what they can use and what they can expect with the tool. So if we click on the hops button, Control-Shift clicking the hops button will actually bring up a tip view showing tips on screen that will cycle in and out, just saying various things in order to either give you motivation, tell you various ways you can use hops, or just let you know something that you maybe didn't know on how you can use your favorite tool to get more interesting results. Out of all the modifiers we support under Q, add modifiers, one of the more questionable ones was the Laplacian smooth. After reading the Blender documentation, I came to realize that it's not suitable for our particular needs, and for that reason, as part of the Super Smooth initiative, we had it merged with Smooth itself, freeing up Laplacian smooth to be removed from the modifier list and allowing us to put something in its stead. If we minimize Blender, we go over to the latest version and we can press Q, and under modifier we see that cloth has taken its place. With the recent hype around cloth, it appeared that we probably needed to come up with something as a response. So as a result, we added some cloth workflows inside of HardOps. So I extracted this piece off of the mesh by control clicking on curve extract to just rip it off, and then I diced it on all axes. If we press Q and we go under cloth, we can just add a cloth modifier. If we click on the play button, the timeline will begin playing, and we can begin scrolling to shrink in order to exponentially add more or less cloth. And this is really a fun way to play with cloth. Also interestingly is if you hover over pressure and you press 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, you can actually adjust the amount of pressure that's happening on the cloth, and then you can even pause it. And with this button, you can actually make it where the timeline restarts with every time you change a parameter. So if we turn this on and we click play, we can see that every time I change the pressure, that the timeline completely starts over. And this is another more interesting way to work, where you can see the results of your settings changes from a clean state and then go from there. But you can also turn it off and actually see your settings take place as it propagates further in the timeline. And then scrolling through shrink, you can just scroll it to whatever level you want. If you shift scroll it, you can scroll it by even finer increments to get just that perfect shrink amount. And then let's say that you're done on a modeling level and you want to proceed, you can actually click apply and click the checkbox, and it will apply it, removing the modifier from the stack, allowing you to put a subdivision on it and set smooth, and you're good to go with a pad. So previously we talked about cloth workflows, where you can just select a piece, choose curve extract, go under mesh tools, control click dice, maybe turn off Z, and after dicing you can just go under modifier and cloth and just begin simulating your cloth, just scrolling your shrink. So we wanted to make it as easy as possible for users to just get in and begin playing with cloth. To show it again, we can actually select the main shape, tab into edit mode, select two new faces, and we'll control click to curve extract. And then we will control click dice in order to dice it on all axes. And we'll go under add modifier, put a cloth, and clicking on the play button, we can see it is play, and we can just add more and more cloth pad to this, and then click apply and be done. And we already know that this modifier has been applied and is complete. So now we can select this last face, control click to curve extract. We can control click to go inside of dice it on all axes. From here, jump into cloth, we click play. And just like we have this new setup here, we can also use the classic setup that we designed as well, where if you basically press F, it'll go to a mouse control mode, and it's more classic where you're jumping through different factors of the modal, mouse moving to adjust your shrinking factor, rolling your wheel to jump to the pressure, where you're able to lower your pressure. You can press 1 to jump the pressure to 1, 2 to jump the pressure to 2, 5 to jump the pressure to 5. And more interestingly is these hotkeys that you see me using for pressure. If we were to press F and jump back into interactive mode, we can actually press these hotkeys over the numerical field in order to change these to whatever we need them to be. So with that, we'll just turn on apply, and then we'll just click the checkbox to be done. And if we look at the modifiers, there are no modifiers, and we could just select this and choose to add a subdivision on it. And also at this point, we can choose to set smooth. We can select both of these, do the same thing, also set smooth on both of them. And after slapping this with a blank material, we're now looking at some finely, but albeit slightly too glossy cloth pads. So the Coridemo is a series I've been doing to show various ways you can deal with a block in that's as simple as this and detail it up to something a little better with a little bit of effort of using Hops Cutter. If we take this classic scene and we press 2 to jump to collection 2, we'll select this back wall, and I will just control click dice in order to dice on all axes. So I'll press Y to omit Y, and once we click, we've now diced this asset. We can now go under modifier, add cloth, and if we click play, it begins playing. And we click apply the checkbox, and it's been applied. We put a subdiv on it and we're good to go. We'll select these things at the top. We'll go under mesh tools, control click dice. We'll press Z to turn off Z, and we'll click to perform the dice, and then we'll add a cloth to it as well. Click play to begin playing, and we see that we need to deal with the pressure. So I'm going to actually roll the pressure negative, and we're just going to add a little bit of extra shrinking to it. And we see that this isn't going to suffice, so I'm just going to click the checkbox to get out of this. And what I'll do is actually put a level of subdivision on this, which will mess up the sim, but once we go back to frame 1 and we begin playing, it'll work out a little bit better. And then from here I can actually press Q, go back under cloth, choose apply, click, and we're done. And then we'll put another subd on it, and of course set these two objects to smooth. To deal with the floor, we'll just select all these pieces, and we'll just take this moment to go under mesh tools, control click dice. It's been there for us. We'll press Z and turn off Z, and let's just click to apply. And first we'll select this piece, and we'll just perform a cloth, click plus, and we see that we're able to deal with the pressure as we want. We're able to scroll it as we want to make it just as poofy as we need it to be. We'll just tighten that up, and we'll click apply and click to be done with that. With this piece, it probably would be better off as not a cloth, but we'll just turn it into a cloth to make this the most padded room ever. We'll adjust the shrinking amount and then also tighten in the pressure, but it's really the shrinking amount that's going to determine how tight your cloth's going to be. By holding shift and scrolling, you're able to scroll to something a little more reasonable. So with this, we can click apply and click the checkbox to just apply it as it is. So for the final piece, we'll do cloth as well, except I will put a subdivision modifier before this one, and we'll just let this play. And let's just press Q and go under cloth, and we see that we probably need to actually scroll this in the negative or positive direction for the pressure to begin getting this to pop out as we would want. And we see that just a little bit of scrolling goes a long ways when it comes to playing the simulation, starting out with relatively simple geometry. I've actually found that by using a subdivision to kind of base it, and then a cloth, and then another subdivision, you can actually get a relatively smooth result without a whole lot of calculation overhead happening. So I'm just going to click apply, click the checkbox, we're done here. We'll just put a subdivision on all of these. With all three of them selected, we'll just click smooth, and if we press 1, we're now looking at a very plush corridor. In addition to Accushape being able to be used on any shape that you have selected, you can also use it on curves. So here we have a Bezier circle. We'll press Q, go down to Accushape, and we're able to adjust the circle. We're even able to hold shift in order to bring it out equidistant. And by pressing spacebar, there's now a lattice placed around a circle, scaling it to the size that we need. We'll press X and delete that. And let's bring in a text tool, and we'll just type in Accushape. And if we press Q and go to Accushape, we are able to see the dimensions of our text object, and we're even able to scroll over this and change them, and notice that it auto equalizes, auto centers it, and as well keeps the proportions of it. And if we press spacebar, the text is scaled perfectly to the shape. So Radial Array is located under Mesh Tools Radial Array, and by clicking it, you're able to jump into a modal and begin radial arraying an object. Users have long requested the ability to radiate an object around another object. So if I Shift A, add a cylinder, we'll scale the cylinder up, and let's just rotate it to something silly out in space. And in order to get our view aligned with this, I'm going to go under Mesh Tools and Control click on Reset Axis to align my view with this object. And from here I can press Box Cutter, and we'll just go under Ngon and just begin drawing a shape. And we'll extrude this shape down and shift click Sharpen in order to fix our sharpening. And let's actually bring this shape back. So if I select this shape and select this shape, new to HardOps, if you shift click Radial Array, it will radiate the object around the second object, allowing you to get really interesting shapes out here in space without a whole lot of effort. In fact, let's view align to this again. We'll choose this dot to create our circle, and we'll just perform a circle extrusion. And let's shift select the main object and then shift click Radial Array in order to radial array this inside this object. We see the boolean didn't connect exactly fluidly, but that's just a matter of us going under our boolean panel and jumping over to exact in order to use the exact algorithm. But you can see that now you're able to radiate objects around other objects using their origin of transformation. So a popular workflow I like to use in HardOps is pressing D, jumping to circle, drawing a circle, shifting it to live, and selecting the top face and control clicking mark in order to do a reverse bevel. Afterwards, I would shift click duplicate solid in order to duplicate the shape and make it solid, and then I would scale that object down. At this point, things would go awry. If I were to go into edit mode and select this and flip the normals, for some reason it actually solves the normals for both of the meshes selected, even though the other mesh is not selected. Ideally, the result is this. You would actually want this to happen, where the shifted mesh that you brought back would be the mesh that you actually were fixing. I'm happy to announce that this bug has been resolved. If we minimize this and jump over to the newer version, we press D, jump over to circle, and we draw out a circle, shift to live. And if we control click mark, we perform a reverse bevel. And if we go and shift click shade solid, we're actually now able to scale this object down, go in edit mode, shift N in order to recalculate the normals and adjust the bevel, just letting you know that even things as small as selection we care about, and this issue has now been resolved, allowing you to go through this workflow fluidly and perfectly. In later versions of Blender, the ability to have a curve be mapped to another curve was changed in the API, which caused a bug. Right here I have a Bezier circle and a Bezier curve. If I were to select this circle, then select this curve and press Q, we can choose curve bevel, which sets this object to be the object bevel of this particular shape. And so now we can duplicate this out and maneuver it around and get a more interesting result, keeping it very simple and very non-destructive. In fact, we can just extrude this in order to create even more wiring as we go. Just letting you know that this bug has now been resolved and you can now curve taper to your heart's content. When it comes to making a mirror tool that works, that means that even if you're in sketch mode, dealing with a sketch, you should be able to press Alt-X to bring up the Hops mirror tool and press Alt-X and mirror without any further ado. This was a bug that was previously affecting newer versions of Blender, just letting you know that we went in and resolved it, and now you can mirror sketches in grease pencil mode. So recently I did this boot, and I found it interesting that whenever I pressed Q, went under operations and looked at the Accushape, that this thing was showing to be 6.9 meters wide. Assuming this is a small woman's shoe, we'll put it 8 inches just to be humorous. And we see that the boot is now actually this small if it were scaled down to the proper scale. So let's press spacebar and scale that down. And whenever it comes to moving a lattice, the easiest way for it to be done for me is to select all the points and press Ctrl H to add a lattice to a new object. And then from here you're able to move the object freely, or at least the empty, and not have to worry about the lattice scaling poorly. Sometimes you'll be moving the lattice and you'll see that things just won't scale right inside of it due to lack of parenting. So helping it out with a hook, it can be essential for that. So now that we have our shoe, we'll hide the lattice and let's bring it back up again and look at the Accushape. So now it's showing that we are now 8 inches along the boot, which is a more appropriate size for a shoe. Previously our boot was something gargantuan, but I just found it interesting looking at a lot of my previous assets that everything was just scaled so poorly that depth of field didn't stand a chance, lighting didn't stand a chance. And so I look forward to improving upon these features over the course of time. But believe me, when it comes to these latest updates, we are just getting started. Just wait until you see what we've done with Box Cutter.